Okay, the witness has been sworn. What title do you prefer, Mr. Daniels?
Agent.
Okay, thank you. Agent Daniels, there's an exclusionary order in this case, meaning people testifying are not permitted to view testimony of those that testified before, and the case has been live streamed as well as open to the public. Have you viewed or watched or in any way observed trial testimony since this case began?
No, I have not.
Okay, have you discussed with anyone else the testimony they've given during trial?
No, I have not.
All right, with that declaration, then, Mr. Woods, if you'd like to proceed with your direct, you may.
Thank you. Can you please state your name and spell your name for the record?
Steve Daniels, last name Daniels,
What is your occupation?
special agent with the FBI.
How long have you worked for the FBI?
I've worked for the FBI for 26 years, approximately.
At any time in your work with the FBI, were you a part of the evidence response team?
I was.
What is the evidence response team?
The evidence response team is basically the crime scene investigation team. We do forensics for the FBI.
How does someone become a member of, now the evidence, we're saying evidence response team, can we call that ERT?
Yes, we can.
Is that how you normally refer to it?
Correct. Yes.
To shorten the time, how does someone become a member of ERT?
And real quick, I approximately 1 year ago, I stepped off of our ERT team.
Okay, so you're no longer a member of ERT.
Correct.
When did you become a member of ERT?
I was on ERT and off ERT. My original entry on ERT was approximately 2001.
How does a member of the FBI become a part of ERT?
Once you become an FBI employee, then there's a hiring process to become an ERT member, like an internal process to become a member.
Okay. And what training is necessary for that?
Once you become an official ERT member, then you get to go back to Fredericksburg, Virginia, and you receive an 80-hour ERT training, a basic training. And at that basic training, that's where you kind of learn the original beginning policies, procedures, how to process crime scenes, how to execute search warrants, that type of thing.
And did you complete that basic ERT training?
Yes, I did.
Is there advanced training available for ERT members?
Yes, there's a lot of advanced trainings after you get the 80-hour basic course completed.
What, if any, advanced trainings did you complete as a member of ERT?
I completed a lot of advanced trainings. I think the one that's relevant today would be the Recovery of Human Remains course. And I completed that one approximately March of 2014. And at that course is held at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And that's a course, it's a 40-hour course. And you have to complete the basic ERT course and another course, advanced course, before you take it. And the pertinent things are, that's the course where you're taught by certified experts from the University of Tennessee how to process human remain recovery sites. So how to collect those sites, how to process the sites. They have a large area where they actually have human remains. And during the course, and it kind of varies, but you get to excavate approximately 4 to 5 burial sites. So my course, we excavated approximately 4 human remains sites during the course. And then at the end of your excavations, your team members or each team will present those, their excavations, what they did, how they did it to each other. So you kind of learn from that. And then besides that, in this area, there's other human remains that are at various states of decomposition. So throughout the course, you kind of learn how the human remains, how they decompose under different circumstances, different variables, and that's all part of the training.
And you completed that training?
Correct, in 2014.
Have you other than this case, ever participated in the recovery of human remains?
Yes. So since 2001 to approximately a year ago, I've participated in many different circumstances of recovering human remains.
At any time, did you hold a leadership position within ERT?
Yes.
What was that?
When I left ERT, I was the senior team leader for the evidence response team out of Salt Lake City, Utah, out of the Salt Lake City division. And our division covers the states of Utah, Idaho, and Montana.
Were you involved with a search of the Chad Daybell residence on June 9th and 10th of 2020?
I was.
What was your involvement there?
I was the ERT senior team leader for that search.
And who asked you to be a part of that search?
Approximately 1 week prior to the search, a local FBI case agent from the area contacted me and informed me that there would be a search warrant execution on the Chad Daybell property. And one of the things we would be looking for would be human remains.
And do you know where Chad Daybell's residence is located?
Yes.
Where is that?
It's in Fremont County, Idaho, and I'd have to look up that address now. I can't remember the exact address.
That's okay. What did you and your team do in preparation for the search of Chad Daybell's property?
So once that FBI agent contacted me about a week prior to the search warrant execution, I spoke with that FBI agent who was one of the case agents for the FBI. And then we contacted local Rexburg Police Department. And then I would have contacted our evidence response team unit. And our evidence response team unit oversees all evidence response teams nationwide. And then I would have contacted the evidence or our FBI laboratory. And at the FBI laboratory, we have a group called the Operational Projects Unit. And together, all of us came up with a search strategy. So we kind of pulled our resources together, talked about this case, this search, this execution, and then the Operations Projects Unit was able to give us some satellite imagery of that property. The case agents, the local police were able to provide us with some information about the case. One of the things was like telephone information, text message information, and we kind of put that all together to come up with a plan. So we had a little bit of prior knowledge before we got there. So we kind of had a little bit of an idea of what we wanted to do.
When did you arrive on the Daybell property?
It would have been June 9th of 2020, and it would have been sometime after 7 a.m.
What was the first thing you instructed your team to do?
Since we had a week of preparation, we had approximately 8 ERT team members, official team members on site. So given that week of preparation, our team members were pre-assigned roles. So we kind of all had at least an initial role or responsibility prior to arrival. So some of those roles would have been to start a crime scene sign-in log, start overall photography of that crime scene. And that just involves getting as-is photos of what that property looks like. And we had a plan in place for how we wanted to start with some priority areas. And then I would have been starting my own log. I have an administrative log that I do. And one of the things, my responsibilities as a team leader is to do a walkthrough. So just doing a survey walkthrough of that property to see what we're actually dealing with now that we're there. And those are some of the initial things.
And I'm sorry if I missed it. Did you designate priority areas for search?
We had a couple priority areas. So one of our known priority areas from the aerial imagery that we looked at ahead of time, like satellite imagery, we knew there was a fire pit on the scene. So that was a priority area for us for sure. So 2 of my ERT team members, they were designated to find the fire pit or go to it since we knew it was already there. And they were designated to further assess that fire pit. We knew from the aerial images that there was a fire pit, at least from whatever date our images were from. But we needed to, once we got there, we needed to see, what does this fire pit actually look like? Could it have been somewhere else, on the dates that we were really interested in? Which the dates we were really interested in were, what did this fire pit look like in September of 2019? So I had a couple team members that were just designated with, once we get there, go straight to the fire pit, trying to assess, what is it? What are we dealing with? Is there anything else in that area? And so we had 2 people designated to that for sure. We had a text message that talked about burying something in a pet cemetery. So we knew that there was some kind of pet cemetery supposedly on the property. So one of my jobs was to try to figure out, where is this pet cemetery? So that was something we didn't know, but we wanted to try to assess that and see if we could figure that out. So that was something I'd be looking for once we got there. And then we had a telephone ping that showed one of the suspects in the case. We had a few, 3 or 4 telephone pings on the property from that September of 2019 time of interest that we had pre-placed on a kind of a satellite image of the property that gave us a few indicators that in September of 2019, these persons were in these areas on the property. So at least that gave us an idea of, hey, let's at least go check out those areas to see if there's any discrepancies, anything interesting in the vicinity of where those telephone pings were at. So we had a couple of those areas that we for sure wanted to go check out. And one of those was northeast of what we assessed to be some kind of pond on the property from those aerial imageries.
Your Honor, I apologize. May I have a brief sidebar with counsel in the court?
Yes. All right, thanks, counsel. You can continue with direct. Mr. Wood.
Thank you. And after that sidebar, Your Honor, I do have some pictures to admit by way of stipulation. I do have copies for court and counsel. The first set of pictures would be 170F through GG. And I, by way of stipulation, move for those to be entered into evidence.
Any objection to 170F through GG? Okay, exhibits 170F through GG are all admitted.
The next set of photos is 170QQ through 170, or I apologize, 170V through 170QQ.
Thank you.
And so by way of stipulation, I'd ask for those to be admitted.
Any objection to 170? Was it V through QQ?
V through QQ, V as in Victor.
Any objection to those?
If I could just have one moment, Judge, please.
You may.
No objection, Judge.
Okay.
Thank you. And the next set would be 170WW through 170XX.
All right, for the record, then 170V through QQ were admitted. 170WW through XX, I'll review those next. And I do want to clarify on marking, Mr. Wood, the first set of F through GG, I'm going to call them out individually to track on the record if these are what you have as well. These were admitted, but it's 170F, 170G, 170H, 170, and it goes to 170X, 170W, 170V, 170U, 170T, and then it's 170GG.
Yes.
Okay.
And I understand they are not necessarily exactly in an order, but that
Okay.
is what they are.
Because the second set would appear to overlap through the first, but they don't. So we'll track those. And again, when they're admitted and for the jurors, they're not necessarily all inclusive of those numbers in between or letters. So we'll make sure that's clear. But there's a third set now, which is WW through XX. Have you had a chance to review those, Mr. Pryor?
I have, Judge, and there's no objection.
Okay, so the set of pictures 170 WW through XX are admitted. And if they are to be published, Mr. Wood, any of these, please reference them clearly on the record so we're tracking which ones are being published.
Okay. And then, Your Honor, the next set of photos is 170 YY through 170 JJJ. I believe those come in by way of stipulation as well, so I'll move for their admission.
All right, Mr. Pryor, have you had an opportunity to review those?
Yes, Judge, and there's no objection.
Okay, the photographs that are contained in what's marked 170 YY through JJJ are admitted. And again, as you reference those throughout testimony, Mr. Wood, please clearly indicate which ones individually are being referenced.
And then, so I have two more sets. 170 KKK through 170 WWW. And if there's no objection, I'll move for the admission of those into evidence.
No objection, Judge.
Okay, exhibits 170 KKK through WWW are all admitted also.
Thank you. And then the last set, Your Honor, is 170A through 170U. And if there's no objection, I'd ask that those be entered into evidence.
And if I could just have a moment, Judge.
You may.
I have no objection, Judge.
Okay, then 170A through U are also admitted. And again, council will ensure that on the record and the way they're entered, eventually the different sets are individually entered as exhibits. So those have all been admitted now.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I appreciate the court's patience in getting that clarified on the record. Agent Daniels, those pictures, were you able to look at those pictures as they were entered into evidence?
I was.
And do you recognize those pictures?
I do.
What are they?
Those are the photographs that our ERT photographers took while we were there on June 9th and 10th of 2020.
And did you work with other members of the FBI to create an interactive exhibit that detailed the work that you did, you and your team did, on the Daybell property on June 9th and 10th, 2020?
I did. I worked with our our Salt Lake City total station operator. I worked with our Salt Lake City Faro scanner operator, and I worked with the operational projects unit. That's our unit at the FBI laboratory, in order to come up with an interactive.
And you mentioned total station. Can you just very briefly describe for the court and the jury what a total station is?
So total station is just a measuring device, and it's a point-to-point measuring device. Sits on a tripod on one end, and on the other end, it has a pole, and at the top of the pole, there's a prism. And on the end that's on top of the tripod, it shoots a laser to the end with the pole with the prism on top. And then that laser will shoot back to the tripod end. And like I said, it's really good for longer distances, and it's a point-to-point measuring tool. So the team can kind of dictate which pieces of evidence or objects it shoots in or measures. So in a scene like the one we'll discuss today, it's good at outdoor scenes. It's good at long distance measurements. It's good at measuring perimeters or grids. And we'll discuss that today later.
Is it fair to say, is it somewhat similar to a surveyor's tool?
Yes, it's similar to what you'll see road construction crews using on the side of a road when they're shooting in longer distance measurements.
And you mentioned a Faro scanner. If you just briefly describe for the court and the jury what a Faro scanner is.
And the Faro scanner is another measuring tool that we'll use on our crime scenes. And it also sits on a tripod, but there's just one measuring tool on the tripod, and it has a laser also, but the laser that it emits is directed by a mirror that spins on it, and it has a horizontal coverage area of 360 degrees and a vertical area of 300 degrees. And as it rotates, it will shoot thousands, of measurements at a time. And wherever we set that scanner, we can't really direct what it's picking up, but it's really good at scanning a lot of areas as it scans. And then we'll just move that around. And for this scene, we did just over 40 scans. So it's when they kind of complement each other. So it's really good using them on these scenes.
You talked about the total station and the Faro scanner. Is the data collected by that voluminous?
Yes.
Okay. And this exhibit that you worked to create, was it created to summarize the voluminous data you collected through photographs, total station Faro scanner? Was it used to summarize that in a way that is presentable to a jury?
Yes. So there was a lot of data that was collected from all of these tools, and that all was presented to the defense and prosecution teams. And then this exhibit was meant to just summarize everything and make it as easy possible for everybody today.
And would that exhibit make it more convenient to provide your testimony rather than bringing in every Faro scan, every total station measurement?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Your Honor, based on Idaho Rule of Evidence 1006, this, the state would move to admit that demonstrative, or apologize, the summary exhibit 171 that the agent has just described.
All right, has defense counsel been able to review the exhibit?
Yes, Judge.
Is there any objection to the admission of summary exhibit 171?
With the understanding, Judge, that it's being offered as a summary of this officer's testimony.
All right, without objection then and pursuant to Rule of Evidence 1006, the exhibit is admitted.
Perfect. And Your Honor, may I publish?
Yes.
And just for the court's information, that exhibit is on a thumb drive.
Okay, so it'll be marked with the corresponding 171
Yes.
designation. Okay.
I believe I gave the court a courtesy copy earlier, and then this one will be presented into evidence.
Very well.
Agent, is this the exhibit you prepared?
Yes, it is.
It's just taking a second to read. Your Honor, I apologize. I appear to be having a small technical difficulty. I'm going to try and reboot this.
Okay.
All right, I think I have it going. Agent, can you describe to the jury what they're seeing right now?
So this opening screen just shows the city of Rexburg to the south, and then north is going to be to the top of our screen on all of these. And then our Daybell property, Chad Daybell property, is going to be up to the top here. And then I think the only thing else to mention is that on June 9th in the early morning, our ERT team staged at this Salem church as local law enforcement secured the Chad Daybell property prior to our arrival.
I apologize, Your Honor. It still seems to be having an issue. There we go. Or maybe not. Your Honor, I do apologize for the technical difficulty. I'm going to try and reboot this one more time. And if it doesn't work, we have an alternative way of presenting it through him.
Judge, could we approach this area so quickly? A sidebar.
I would prefer if Mr. Wood maybe continues working on that. Is there another prosecutor that can sidebar in his absence?
The time, I don't know if we'd want to break for, I don't know if lunch would already be here. If it is, if we'd want to break for an early lunch and we get this figured out.
If you think it's going to be some additional time, that's probably the best choice at this time. We're back on the record on CR 22-21-16-23, State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell. Agent Daniels is on the stand in direct examination. I'll remind the agent he's still under oath for his testimony. And Mr. Wood is continuing with direct and had an exhibit you were working on that I understand is functioning now. Is that right?
Yes, and I thank the court for your patience.
Okay, thank you. If you want to go ahead and continue with direct, you may.
All right, if I may publish through the HDMI.
Yes.
Agent Daniels, you were in the process of just quickly describing what this picture shows.
On the bottom, it just shows the city of Rexburg, and it shows the Salem Church where the ERT team staged the morning of June 9th, 2020, prior to the search warrant execution. And at the top, which is north, and it'll be north on all of the pictures that we show, it shows the Chad Daybell property.
And just to clarify, you were part of the search there on June 9th, correct?
Correct. I was the ERT senior team leader.
All right. Agent, I'm going to start with the house on the property. Can you describe what you see in this picture? And Your Honor, this is State's Exhibit 170 VV.
This is just an overall photo showing the front door of the residence, which is located on the west side of the property.
Okay. And can you explain what you saw in this picture and where it was taken?
This is just a vantage point photo, and it was taken on the second story level of the residence, which is right about there. And the picture is taken outside of this window, and it's just looking towards this large tree. And that's in the area of where we found J.J. Vallo's human remains. And then in that photo, you see a trailer there, and that's not typically there. That's a law enforcement trailer.
Okay. And where was this photo taken from?
This is another vantage point photo from that same window on the second story of the residence. And I'm pointing to it with my laser pointer. And it's just showing, we've just changed directions a little bit. So now it's showing some of the outbuildings. We call them outbuildings. So a chicken coop, another shed, and then there's a larger garage or barn in the background. And just past that garage is where we found Tylee Ryan's human remains. And then over to the right, I'm trying to point to it with my laser pointer, and this area is the area of where the fire pit was located. And then there's another law enforcement vehicle right here that typically isn't there. And with these vantage point photos, we're just trying to show the perspective. If you were a resident in the home, these are some of what you would see looking out of the home.
Judge, could I have a listing of what picture number that was last?
That was 170 TT.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Wood, if you'll try to reference those each time, thank you.
And this next picture is 170 WW. Agent, if you can tell us what you see and where that was taken from.
This is another ERT photograph, another vantage point photo from the residence, and it's looking through a kitchen window. And this time it's still pointing to the east part of the property. And this time you can see kind of that area of that large garage or barn. Eventually we'll see better pictures of that barn, but this is the area where there's a large garage door, so the entryway to that barn. And then on what ends up being the southeast corner of that garage or barn, there's kind of a man door. So from this photo, you can see the entryways to that large garage. And then past that garage again was where we end up locating Tylee Ryan's burial site. And then just to the right is the area of the fire pit.
And Your Honor, this photo is 170SS. If you can just briefly describe where that was taken from and what you see.
This is another ERT photo, and it was taken from one of the bedrooms on the southeast portion of the residence. And it's another vantage point photograph. And as you look to the east of the property, again, you can see the outbuildings, the entrances to those outbuildings. You can see the entrance to the garage. There's a garage door in this area where I'm pointing. And then there's a man door. Can't really see it, but it's in the southeast corner of that garage or barn. And then you can see the top part of the large tree. And in at the base of that tree in that area is where we found J.J. Vallow's remains. And then just past the large garage is where we found Tylee Ryan's remains. And just in this area is where the fire pit's located.
And Your Honor, I misspoke. That was picture 170XX.
Okay.
And Agent, you testified earlier about how when you got there, you picked out some areas of interest. Can you, with your pointer, show the jury where those areas were?
Prior to arriving from our aerial images that we saw, like satellite imagery, this was the area of the fire pit. So we knew that was a priority area. We were going to look for Pet Cemetery, which we didn't know where it was on the property yet. And then we had some telephone ping information. One of those pings was in the area up here where I'm trying kind of circling. JJ's human remains end up being found where that orange rectangle is. And our pet cemetery ends up being found in this area right here. And that square ends up being Tylee's burial site. But at the time, prior to arrival, we didn't know that was going to be exactly that was going to be Tylee's burial site. We didn't know exactly that was going to be JJ's burial site.
I'm going to click on this fire pit area and click on show measurements. Can you explain for the jury what those measurements are?
So initially when we arrived, we had 2 team members that were designated to go to the known fire pit and start assessing what are we dealing with on June 9th. And so part of that assessment, they started observing ash on the ground in the area of this fire pit. And they started setting up this grid. So this outer portion that I'm highlighting right now is the outer perimeter of the grid they set up. And the reason they did that was just because of the ash that they could see on that ground in the vicinity of the fire pit. And with the grids that they ended up setting up, they just kind of quadranted out. So they made a quadrant here, a quadrant there, one right here around the fire pit, and then the fire pit actually became a quadrant. So that was just an easy way for us to kind of designate and search each of those individual quadrants and search the fire pit. And we'll get into that in a minute. And it just, as we collect those items from each quadrant or grid, it's just an easy way for us to kind of document where things came from. And then in a minute, we'll show some photos of a charm that we located. And that's dot right there is where the approximate location of where we found a silver charm. And we didn't get an exact measurement to that charm, but with our total station measuring tool that I described earlier, we total stationed in all of these outer points, the perimeter and inner points, like just where these corners meet of this grid. And with our operational project unit was later able to take a measurement from that northeastern corner and then take a measurement. This fire pit ring ends up being center blocks. So at each end of each of the center blocks, we took a total station measurement. So from those measurements, we were able to get a precise measurement of that northeastern corner to one of the ends of our center blocks. And so that's the measurement you're seeing there, 33 feet, 1 inch. And so you get an approximate distance from the northeast corner to the fire pit ring. And so we're at least able to show you an approximate distance as to where that silver charm was located.
So, Agent, I'm going to click on these photos. And Your Honor, this photo is 170CCC. Can you explain for the jury what this vantage point is?
This is just an overall photograph showing an as-is photo. And in this photograph, once we were there, we could assess that this was an area, or I was able to assess that, hey, this is probably where our pet cemetery is. And I made that assessment based on there was a small dog statue right there at the bottom of that pole. And then in front of this dog statue, there were some discrepancies to the ground or some depressions. And so I was quickly able just to make a pretty decent sized square in this vicinity and get a team to start processing that area. And that's what we called our pet cemetery initially. And then in the background, you can kind of see where the fire pit area is back here. And so that's just an as-is photo showing what that looked like initially.
And this photo?
And this is just an example of that, the piece of the measuring equipment you see in the middle there, that's our Faro scanner. It just sits on a tripod. And then this fluorescent tape that you can see around on the ground, that's the team starting to create those grids that you can see over on the left side here. So the creation of the grids, and then you can see our Faro scanner starting to take scans of that area.
And Your Honor, that's States Exhibit 170FFF. And this is States Exhibit 170BBB as in Bravo. And Agent, can you describe what you see here?
And knowing that there was a fire pit and knowing that that could be a place where we could potentially find evidence, we processed this fire pit, and we wanted to show this photo just to talk about that a little bit. So this is an as-is photo of what this fire pit looked like when we arrived on June 9th. And the way we're going to process this fire pit is we're just going to process it layer by layer. And I'll probably say that a lot today, but we're going to process this layer by layer. We're going to take that initial top layer of tree branches out of there, look through it for evidence. And then eventually when we start getting to the soil and debris that's in the fire pit, we'll start processing that soil and debris. And we've got a particular way that we'll process that. We put a tarp down, and then we have sifters. So we have wooden sifters. And within these sifters, we have wire mesh. And then on top of that tarp, we use 5-gallon buckets. And so eventually we'll get shovels and usually end up scooping out the different soil, the layers of soil into these 5-gallon buckets. And then it's a team effort. So the team members will start taking the soil to the sifters. And it's usually at least a 2-person operation. One person's required to operate the sifter. You kind of have to shake it back and forth. And at least one person has to pour the 5-gallon buckets of soil and debris into the sifter. And then you start watching to see what you're collecting. And then we'll start, if there's anything valuable that shows up, we'll start collecting that. So that's kind of a quick explanation of what that process is like. And that sifting process is done at the fire pit. Eventually, when we start identifying the burial sites, we do a sifting process at JJ's burial and at Tylee's burial. So that's a common sifting process that's done throughout this scene this day, or these days.
Your Honor, this is photo 170AAA. And Agent, can you tell the jury what's going on in this photo?
And this is just, we're continuing that process I just described. So those tree branches are obviously gone. We're at a new layer. And then we're just continuing to go through these different layers. And that process I just described would be happening. And then as we're going through that soil and we're sifting the soil, we're going to start collecting evidence. And we'll start to see some photos of that in a minute of what we start collecting. And then this just is just closer to being finished processing the fire pit. You can see that we've finally taken a rake. You can see the different lines through the soil. So we've raked a lot of that final layer. We've removed even the center blocks. So we've kind of getting close to completion here, but that's what it looks like kind of when you're done. And then a lot of the outside grids, they most likely didn't have any sifting done in those outside grids, but this raking process was probably done on those harder surfaces. And usually just a visual inspection of the harder surfaces with some kind of raking tool is all that would be required to see if you can see any evidence.
All right. And Your Honor, that was photo 170ZZ. Detective, what is, and Your Honor, this is photo 170YY. Agent, what did you observe in this photo?
This is a Pura Vida chain that was collected from the fire pit. So from that sifting operation that we did, this is one of the important pieces of evidence that we collected. And so this is the type of things that you will find when you do those, sift through all of that soil and debris. And then other things that were collected from the fire pit were possible bone fragments, possible organic material. There was at least one possible fabric piece and a possible cloth piece. And I'm using possible because at the time we're doing this out there, a lot of the smaller things that we're finding in fire pits, we can't make the determination on scene. So for a lot of that stuff, we'll just collect that, and then later we'll send that to a laboratory to get determinations.
Judge, can I voir dire a native objection?
You'll have to wait till another question now, Mr. Pryor.
And Agent, what did you observe in this photo?
This is the silver charm that was collected, and it's the one that will reference back to this red dot in the measurement screen over here at the northeast area. And so,
Your Honor, I'll just, for the record, that's 170DDD as in Delta.
and as the team was setting up this grid, this was one of the first pieces of evidence that we collected on June 9th. As they were setting up this grid, they observed that silver charm just outside of our grid perimeter.
All right. And what is that photo of?
This is just a closer view of that charm in place on the ground.
Thank you. And Your Honor, that's 170GGG. And what do you observe in this photo?
This is the same charm in place. We've just placed a placard. And obviously this is item number 1. So that was the first item collected.
And Your Honor, that's 170HHH. And this is 170III. And can you explain what you see there?
This is it. Now we've moved it. We've just put it on a piece of paper and with the same close-up photo with scale.
Okay. Your Honor, the court has States Exhibits 175 and 273. We'd ask that those be provided.
All right, we'll get those.
And then while they're getting that, if the state could be handed States Exhibit 6.
Submitted. What's that? Okay, we have 6. Did you also want 175 and 273?
Yes, those are two pieces of physical evidence that were brought in.
Oh, okay. And you want those brought in at this time?
If that's possible, Your Honor.
Yeah,
yes.
we can do that. So we've got some physical evidence that's going to be brought in at this point. I'll
273.
ask the bailiff to please coordinate that.
Your Honor, I might inquire now. These next two items are smaller items. Do you want them placed on the table, or can they be given to Mr. Daniels on the stand?
Let's get them admitted first before they're handled, and then if they're smaller, I don't mind if the witness is able to handle them. You want to allow defense an opportunity to view those,
Yes.
and then we'll.
Marking them, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll instruct the bailiff, please hand those to the witness at this time, and you can inquire in aid of admission if you wish, Mr. Wood.
Thank you. Agent, do you recognize what's been marked as State's Exhibit 273?
Open these or?
Your Honor, may he open those to identify the without showing to the jury to identify the content?
Yeah, and we do have gloves up there if you'd like to wear those. I don't know if that matters to the state. And
I think he's wearing some.
okay, didn't see that. Thank you.
I recognize these.
What does it purport to be?
It's the Pura Vida chain and the silver charm.
Okay, and which one was marked as 273?
The Pura Vida chain.
Okay. Is that the same chain that was collected from Chad Daybell's residence on June 9th, 2020?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'd ask that State's Exhibit 273 be entered into evidence.
Any objection? All
No
right.
objection, Judge.
All right, without objection, then that was 273 is admitted.
And then can you identify State's Exhibit 175?
Yes,
What does that purport to be?
it's the silver charm.
And is that the charm that you and your team recovered on June 9th, 2020?
Yes, it is.
You recognize it to be the same?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, I'd ask that State's Exhibit 175 be entered into evidence.
No objection, Judge.
Very well, 175 is also admitted.
And Your Honor, we'd like to show those to the jury. I don't know how the court would like that. We do have plastic baggies they can be placed into, so nobody's actually handling them. if you want the witness or the bailiff to show it to them.
You can do that either way, Mr. Woodard. You could also probably project an image of them with the Elmo.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay. And Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'll also mark these bags with the corresponding state's exhibit numbers.
Yes, you may do that.
And may I publish by the Elmo?
Yes.
Agent, can you describe what you found in State's Exhibit 273?
This is the Pura Vida chain that was found inside the fire pit. And then on this end right here is where it says Pura Vida.
And was that actually in the fire pit?
That was in the fire pit. And then the team found that when we were conducting the sifting operation that I described.
Your Honor, for the record, I'm now publishing State's Exhibit 175.
All right, 175 is being published.
And can you describe what you see there?
That's the silver charm. And that's the charm that was found in that northeast corner, just outside of our grid perimeter. And that was seen on our exhibit, indicated by that red dot over by the measurement area.
And Your Honor, for the record, I'm now publishing State's Exhibit 6. Agent, have you seen this image before?
I have.
Do you know who that individual is?
Tylee Ryan?
Do you see her wearing any jewelry?
I do.
Does that jewelry resemble or look like the jewelry recovered from Chad Daybell's property?
It does.
Thank you. And Your Honor, if I can go back to the HDMI.
Okay.
Agent, I'm going to click on this area that's marked as Site 2. And what was Site 2?
Site 2 is the burial site for Tylee Ryan.
Your Honor, this is photo 170V. Agent, can you describe what the jury is seeing in this photograph?
This shows our initial pet cemetery site, and I'm kind of highlighting it with the pointer. And you can see the dog statue This was the area that was right in front of the dog statue that I initially said was the pet cemetery. We ended up finding a dog remains in this area right in front of the statue, and then cat remains in this general area. And we processed that area initially by hand, kind of doing a layer by layer approach. Once those remains were removed, we utilized this backhoe. And the backhoe in this picture has started to go deeper in our initial excavation of the pet cemetery. And now the backhoe started to expand that initial site and go north on the property. And that's what we're seeing in this photo, is that expansion northward. And what we'll end up finding is Tylee Ryan's burial site will be in this just north of that initial pet cemetery area.
And Your Honor, I think at this point, you talked about turning off the
Publishing of these photos.
publishing of the photos to the public.
Okay.
This may be a good place.
Going forward here, there's going to be some more graphic imagery in these photos. I am advised, and for that reason, they'll be shown and published if requested to the jurors and the parties. However, the court's going to prohibit their introduction on the live stream or otherwise to members of the audience attending. So we'll get the monitors set up in order to continue to publish these photos going forward.
All right.
I don't know if we probably need to reseat some of the members of the public as well. So if everybody wants to just stand up and take a stand-up break for a moment, we'll get that arranged. All rise, please. So, so folks, all seats are fair game at this point. We got to clear off from this side. So you can sit anywhere in this general area, even in that front row, right over there where it says reserve, just so we can accommodate everybody. And then once you are settled, you're welcome to sit down. Okay, thanks everyone for accommodating that request. Are the jurors' monitors working? Okay, thank you. You can proceed, Mr. Wood.
Thank you. And Your Honor, this is photo 170W. Agent, can you describe what the jury is seeing in 17 or in this photo?
As the backhoe is expanding northward from the pet cemetery, this is one of two vertebrae that were identified. And at this time, we weren't able to determine if this was a human vertebrae. But the key thing was, at this point, we stopped and we had an anthropologist with us on scene, and we tried to make a determination if this was human or not. And while that determination was being attempted, I caught an odor of human remains decomposing. And so that leads us to stop utilizing the tractor, and we start processing this area by hand.
And Your Honor, this is photo 170X. Agent, can you describe what you see in this photo?
This photo was taken around that same time frame that the two vertebrae were uncovered by the tractor. And once we smelt that possible human remain decomposing, and we saw those potential vertebrae that could be human remains, these bricks that are in the top portion of that photo, those were so close to this area. And at the time, we don't know yet if these are human remains. But if that is human remains, those bricks are close enough to where this human remains could be, that we decided we wanted to keep those, or potentially keep those, as evidence. So this photo just shows kind of that initial, we may be onto something here. This photo just helps show that initial, our clue that we could be hitting human remains. And it's important to note that at this time, we had already found JJ's burial site. And when we get to JJ's burial site, he was covered with stones and cement blocks, or stones and cement. So we had an idea that it's possible her remains something could have been placed on top of her human remains too. And then in the middle of this photo,
Agent, if you could just, one moment, I need to identify this photo for the court, 170Y. And what did you observe in this photo?
This is a photograph we took, and then it's important to note that I wish I could point to it, but in the middle of this photo, this is the other vertebrae that was discovered around this same time. So these were the two vertebrae that the anthropologist was trying to make that determination on, is this human or not? But again, at this time, we couldn't make that determination yet, but we decided to start using hand tools.
Agent, can you see the mouse from my computer screen?
Yes.
Is this
Yes.
What you were talking about?
Yep, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you.
And Your Honor, this is 170Z. Agent, what do you see in this photo?
In the very middle of that photo, there's a larger white piece of bone, and that area ends up being Tylee's burial site.
And Agent, I don't mean to interrupt you, but is this what you were speaking about?
Yes.
With my mouse, okay.
And then I wanted to take a second on this photo, again, at this time, we couldn't tell, we weren't positive that these were human remains, but we were treating it like it could be, and we were going to start excavating. And I just wanted to take a second to how we process these scenes is we'll set a perimeter, and then we'll start processing layer by layer. So try to take layer by layer and excavate the site, just so that we can hopefully tell the story. If these are human remains, we want to know how they were buried.
Your Honor, this is photo 170AA. And Agent, what did you observe in this photograph?
And this is just a closer, now we've excavated that bone that we saw in the last one. So we're getting a little bit deeper around it. We haven't fully excavated it, but we're just getting deeper around it, trying to excavate it. So now you're starting to see flesh. You're starting to see some charred parts of it. And so the team's just attempting to make sense of what is this. It still doesn't have we can't associate or identify it with human yet. Our anthropologist can't say it's human yet. So we're just trying to excavate down. Can we get to it? Can we see more of it to try to make those determinations? And another thing just to note is that we have a variety of tools that we'll use to do these excavations. We have shovels, rakes, picks, typically when we're further away from the remains. As we get closer, we'll use smaller things. We have smaller shovels, rakes. We have wooden tools that we'll use. We like to use clay modeling tools. We like to use tongue depressors if we get closer to bone and flesh. So that's kind of the variety of tools that we'll use for these different scenes. But this is just that closer up view of what we were dealing with. But again, at the time, we couldn't make the determination that this was human remains. So we're just trying to get to what this is and excavate it.
And Your Honor, this is photo 170DD as in Delta. And Agent, if you can describe what was going on in this photograph.
So we were finally able to remove those pieces that we saw in the last photo. And these were the first pieces of what ends up being Tylee Ryan that we were able to excavate. And you can see from the photos, it was difficult for us to excavate. And when we finally excavated it, these were the first pieces that we were able to say, these are human remains. And at this point, this was kind of our ending point, or we started wrapping up for the day. And so these human remains ended up going to the coroner. So they ended up going to the coroner's. The coroner removed them from the scene. And then at this point, we knew for sure that site we were just looking at, that's going to be Tylee Ryan's burial site. And that's where we're going to excavate. So we set up a good perimeter now, and we'll come back on June 10th and finish excavating that site and come up with a better strategy or plan to finish the excavation. At this point, it was kind of hard for the team, the entire team. We had more than the ERT team out there, all of law enforcement. It was just, we didn't know necessarily what we were dealing with up until this point. So it was nice to have that final confirmation that these are human remains. And now we kind of stopped for the day knowing that at least we've got the right site. We'll come back tomorrow and fresh, and we'll finish the excavation.
And Your Honor, this is photo 170BB as in Bravo. And Agent, is this just a closer up photo of the last?
Yeah, this is just a closer up photo of those bigger pieces that we were able to excavate that day. And it just shows kind of some of that charring pink flesh, what we were able to remove on June 9th, 2020. Kind of closed out our day with that burial.
And Agent, what do you see in this photo?
After we removed those larger pieces on June 9th, this is just the photo of what was left in the burial. So this is what it looked like once those bigger pieces were removed. And this would have been what we came back to on June 10th.
And for the record, that's 170LL. And Your Honor, this is 170CC. What was happening in this picture?
And I would just call this more of an exit photo. So now we've kind of wrapped things up for June 9th. And that's just kind of how we started. We were starting to put things away, and then we're getting ready to leave the scene for June 9th.
And Your Honor, this is 170EE as in Echo. Agent, what do you see in this photo?
This is going to be the morning of June 10th. So now we're back on scene, and we're one of our priorities, we have a lot of priorities, but one of the priorities for June 10th is going to be to finish the excavation of Tylee Ryan's burial site. And in this photo, you can see those orange stakes. The orange stakes is the perimeter I set up around Tylee Ryan's burial site. So that's going to be one of our main focuses for June 10th.
Agent, you had spoken earlier about sifters. Can you see where my mouse is located?
Yes.
Or pointer, I should say. Is that one of the sifting tools you used?
Yes, that's one of our wooden sifters. And on the inside of that, there's a wire mesh. So that's what the sifters look like.
Your Honor, this is photo 170FF. And Agent, what was going on in this photograph?
So this is just showing there's those orange stakes. So that's just outlining kind of the perimeter now of Tylee Ryan's burial site. And that's going to be where her remains are. Now we just need to do that process we've talked about, just kind of layer by layer excavation. And we're just going to try to note anything significant that we find as we go layer by layer down. And we're just going to try to show that story of how we find her inside that burial site.
Your Honor, this is photo 170GG. Agent, what did you observe here?
And now you can see on this one, on one side of the burial site, we were able to excavate pretty deep, and you can start to see a green melted 5-gallon bucket. And then at the very bottom, we finally see something identifiable to us, which was Tylee's skull. And that's what you're basically seeing. On the top portion of that photograph, just something to note was the soil on the top side was, there was a harder substance to it. And I don't know what that was, but it just made it difficult for us to excavate. And what we end up doing is and I don't know if it was concrete or a quickcrete or what it was, but it made it hard to excavate. So we end up getting the backhoe and kind of pulling back that hard substance. And that's kind of what I wanted to show or talk about in that one.
Your Honor, this is photograph 170HH. And Agent, what did you observe here?
Now you can see that we've got around the entire human remains. And this is just we're pedestaling out these human remains. And it's just something really unique. They don't look like human remains. What we end up finding is just kind of this melted mass of remains. And you can see that you can kind of see the edge of the melted green bucket on this photo. And we finally did get to the other side where that harder substance soil was. We got past that, but we're able to at least give you guys an idea of how these remains were buried.
And Your Honor, this is photo 170II. And Agent, what did you observe here?
This is just a close-up of that mass of remains. And initially, when we were trying to excavate from the top, not knowing what it was, this is just a good example of kind of why we didn't know what it was. We were trying to excavate this. It felt like it was organic material, but we just couldn't. It didn't make sense to us. Like, this doesn't look like human remains, but it's not dirt. And I mean, that was the top part we were trying to get through, and we couldn't make sense of it.
And Your Honor, this is photo 170KK. Agent, what did you observe in this?
And this is just close-up photos of what was identifiable to us. So anytime we see something that we can identify with, we just naturally want to get good photos of that. So this is just closer up shots, the best we could get of that melted green 5-gallon bucket and the skull that was at the very bottom.
And Agent, if you can see my pointer, is this the skull you're referring to?
Yes.
And Your Honor, this is 170JJ. Agent, what is this?
This is just another close-up as best we could. Again, we're trying to get deep in that hole or the burial and get a close-up as best we can in place of that skull. And that's what you're seeing.
Your Honor, this is 17000. Agent, what was this?
And then this is just the human remains, the massive melted remains. At some point, we just had to make the decision. We've excavated as best we could. We've shown everything we can. Now we just need to try to remove those remains. So when the team got in there to remove those remains, they fell apart. But this is just showing that burial with the remains removed.
When you say they fell apart, how did that happen? What was going on when they fell apart?
Well, just as a team of people tried to lift that pedestaled out mass of remains, it literally just fell to pieces. And so then just imagine us all trying to pick up those pieces and put them into a body bag that was placed close by.
Your Honor, this is photo 170NN. Agent, what was this?
And then this is the coroner's body bag that was nearby that burial. And then these are those pieces that were then placed in the coroner's body bag.
Your Honor, 170MM. Agent, what was this?
So once we've removed all of the human remains that we could see in from the burial, we had the anthropologist just go through the remains just to give us kind of a filled inventory of what remains do we have? Does it look like we have everything? As a team leader, we just want to make sure, could there be other burials on the property? Do we have everything? And so the assessment was we have everything that we need from the one burial. And so that's kind of what this was. It was the anthropologist coroner kind of going through the pieces just to give us some feedback as to if we have what we need.
Your Honor, the 170PP. Agent, what is this a photo of?
This is just a closer up photo now of those bricks. So now once we've decided, hey, the human remains were here, this was the burial, let's go ahead and collect those bricks. We still couldn't say that those bricks were on top of Tylee Ryan's grave, but they were close enough. And after what we saw at JJ's grave, we decided to collect those as evidence just in case.
Your Honor, this is photo 170QQ. And Agent, what did you see here?
This was just at the very end after we were done collecting the human remains. We had the backhoe just go a little deeper in the burials in each of them, but this was Tylee's. We had the backhoe just go a little deeper and a little bit wider at the burial just to ensure that we had everything and we didn't see anything else unusual in the area. And then once the backhoe was done, then we covered the area back up. So we put the animal remains back in and we covered the entire area with backfilled all of the holes that we dug.
Agent, what do you see on the screen?
I see Faro scanner diagrams at the bottom, and then over to the right, there's our ERT photographs in a line.
And can you just describe the relationship between these photographs and the Faro scanning that is pictured?
So the ERT photographs are to your right on this screen, and as we click on each one of the photographs, it's just going to show it's when you click on it, that photograph is going to be blown up in the middle, and then it's going to show a layer. They'll start with layer A, and then when we click on that layer, you're going to get a line in the bottom Faro scanner diagram. And all it's going to show us in the Faro scanner diagram is just an approximate depth for where we are at on that ERT photo, that layer.
Okay. And the numbers going down the middle is that?
And that's in the numbers going down the middle is just a depth measurement, and it's going by feet. So 0 to 1 foot, 2 foot to 3 foot.
And at this level, it was approximately 2 feet.
Approximately 2 feet at layer C.
And at layer D?
Just under 2 feet.
And at layer E when it was removed?
Still just under 2 feet.
Okay. Agent, I'm going to call your attention to what's labeled here as the shed or barn. What is the jury seeing in this photo? And I apologize, Your Honor, that's 170WWW.
Oh, this is a picture of that garage or barn. And if you were looking from some of those vantage points from the residence, if you walk out of the residence, the back door of the residence, you would see this garage door. So this would be the first big entryway from the residence. So we're about to walk into, it's an overall photo showing the big garage door as you walk into the garage or barn.
And what do you see here?
This is another what we call overall photo of that garage area as you walk inside. And then over to the right, things of interest will be the tools that we're going to be looking at inside this garage. And one of the keys is for me, what I'm interested in, the ERT team's interested in, or law enforcement's interested in a burial site, is what tools could be used to bury somebody.
And Your Honor, that's 170QQQ. And what did you see here, Agent?
As you walk to that big garage door, which you can see in the photo, and if you just turn right, then you're going to see the tools lined up on the right side of that garage, or it's going to be the south side of the property.
And Your Honor, that's 170PPP. And what did you see here, Agent?
And this is just a medium shot now of those tools on that same side of the garage. We're just getting a little closer to them.
Right. And that's, Your Honor, that's photo 170000.
And just to inquire, Mr. Wood, are we through the graphic imagery at this point, or is it coming back in?
It would be coming back in. Could we have a very brief sidebar?
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you. All right, thanks, Council. On the sidebar there, we just discussed scheduling for today and where the state thought they might want to break for the day. We're going to continue on and bypass the mid-afternoon break so long as the jurors are all okay with that for now. And I think there's kind of an estimate that maybe here in 30 minutes or so we'll be concluding to break till Monday. Is that where you think things will be, Mr. Wood?
Somewhat around there. And Your Honor, I appreciate that. Just based on the court's earlier request of when we'll be breaking, I think that would probably be the best place.
Okay. So if you want to just continue on with direct, and given that with our scheduling, is there going to be any more of the graphic photos today?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so we can go ahead and just have the monitors or the projection if you publish anything further at this point, and then we'll go back to that further on Monday.
I don't recall, Your Honor, if I had labeled this picture. It's 170NNN.
Okay, not yet. So QQQ, I think, was the last one I had.
And so this is 170NNN. And Agent, can you just describe what you documented there?
So all of those pictures of photos of tools we just looked at, these are the ones that were against that right side of the garage or the south side of that garage or barn. These are the ones we took as evidence, and these are most likely that could have been used in a burial.
And Your Honor, this is 170MMM as in Michael. Agent, what was this?
This is one of those tools we just saw that was taken as evidence, and it's just a pick.
Your Honor, 170LLL. Agent, is that the same pick?
That's the same pick we just saw that was taken as evidence. And this just shows some of the reasons we took it as evidence because of that debris you can see on the blade of that pick and some of the other black marks, on that pick.
And you have your pointer now. Can you point out what your
Thanks.
what you're referencing there?
There's some kind of debris on the blade of this pick, and you can kind of see the black, potentially char marks on this pick.
Grounds? Sustain.
Okay.
Just to that part of the response, Mr. Wood.
Your Honor, this is 170KKK. Agent, what is this a photograph of?
This is another closer up picture of two of the shovels that were taken as evidence. And again, you can see that why they were taken as evidence, because the shovels are dirty. So it appears that they were used.
Your Honor, this is photo 170UUU. And Agent, what was the significance of that photograph?
As you walk into the garage, and if you make a left, these are tools that were collected as evidence that were from the left side of that first entryway of the garage. So we're on the west side of the garage, and then as you walk in the garage right here, you make a left. These tools were in this area. And obviously we're taking tools that could have been used to do something to our human remains we found.
And Your Honor, this is 170V as in Victor. Agent, what is this a photograph of?
This is just an overall photo of some of the tools that were in the west side of this garage. And we didn't take all of these tools as evidence, but we just wanted a picture of a lot of the different tools.
And this is 170SSS. Agent, what was this a photograph of?
This is just an overall picture of some of the tools that were on the east part of the garage. And these tools were in the southeast corner of this garage. And you can see the man door right here. That door was located on the south side right there.
This is photograph 170TTT. What was this an image of?
These are those same tools in that same area, from the shovel over to the hoe. These tools were the ones that we actually collected as evidence, just because they could have been tools we thought could have been used to do our burials or other physical damage.
And Your Honor, I need to make a correction on the labeling.
Okay.
This was image 170TTT. And the last image shown was 170SSS. And Agent, Your Honor, this is 170RRR. What was this an image of?
These are bricks that were similar to the bricks that we found near Tylee Ryan's burial site. And we found these bricks over by this shed. And we took a sample of those bricks also.
Your Honor, the court has states exhibits 173 and 172. We'd ask that they be their physical evidence. We ask that they be brought out, and I believe they'll be coming in by way of stipulation.
Okay,
No objection, Judge.
All right, the defense has reviewed both exhibits 173 and 172. They've been offered and are admitted. I'll instruct the bailiffs to retrieve those, and they can be brought into the courtroom.
And while they retrieve those, Agent, what did you do with the tools you collected?
We turned everything over to the Rexburg PD at the end of both days. So we packaged them on scene and then turned them over to Rexburg PD.
And it probably is obvious, but when you say PD, is that referring to the police department?
Police department.
Okay. And Your Honor, from my understanding, we were going to ask Agent Daniels to approach this table and give him a handheld microphone.
Okay, the witness can approach the table. If you'll stand, of course, on the side furthest from the jurors, facing the jurors, I guess, would be the appropriate place, and we'll get a microphone for you to continue testifying.
Agent, or do you recognize these as State's Exhibits 173 and 172?
I do.
What are they?
It's the pick from one of the photos we just showed you, and it's the yellow handled and yellow and black handled shovel from one of the photos we just showed you.
And can you unwrap the pick and show it to the jury?
Can you identify which of the two, which exhibit is that?
Oh, I apologize. That is 172.
So this was the pick that we found as you walked into that garage. And then to your right, this was the pick that was to the right. And originally when we found it was in a crate. And then when we removed it from the crate, it was one of the ones we lined up. And you saw a picture of it when it was lined up with a few other items. And we took them as evidence.
And Agent, without stating anything conclusory about what's on that pick, what about that pick drew your attention?
Typically, when we look for tools to take, we'll look for tools that we typically use for burials. And I already kind of mentioned to you some of those tools. We use rakes, shovels, picks, and other items. So this is a pick. So we'll kind of scrutinize those more. And then this one was, we'll just say dirty. So it was dirty. And so that was something that drew our attention. And that would just give it, the lab would be easier to test a dirty item. So those are things that we would look for.
Thank you. And then if you can unwrap State's Exhibit 173 and show that to the jury. If you can explain what that is and why you collected that item.
So again, if you walk into that garage through the big garage door, off to your right, this was one of the tools that was up against the south side of that garage. And then again, it's just a tool that we typically use when we're excavating, and a tool that could be used for a burial. And then we had already excavated and processed the fire pit. And so it just seemed dirty, a tool that we would be interested in for this scene.
Thank you. And it could be wrapped up again. And Your Honor, that actually went a little faster than what I had anticipated. If leave it at the discretion of the court, I believe I could finish up my direct by 2:30. If the court would like us to do that, I'll leave that up to the court. I understand that we'd still have to bring this witness back for cross. So however the court wants to do that is fine with the state.
Why don't you, well, I guess I can leave it up to you somewhat as well, Mr. Wood. I don't want to, would it make sense to go another 10 or 15 minutes? Or would that just put it too close to when you want to conclude your line of question?
I think it would probably take about another 40.
Okay. Well, given the schedule and concerns we had today, I think what we'll do is go ahead and recess for the afternoon then, given the time. I appreciate you inquiring on that, Mr. Wood. We will go ahead and break until Monday then, and we'll continue with testimony of Agent Daniels on Monday. All right, I'll remind Agent Daniels, he's still under oath for purposes of his testimony, having been sworn last week. Also, over the weekend, Agent Daniels, did you view any of the trial that's contained online or otherwise see any trial testimony that you weren't aware of before you testified?
No, I have not.
Okay, thank you for following that instruction. Then, Mr. Wood, if you'd like to continue with your direct, you may.
Thank you. And if I may publish through the HDMI.
Yes.
Morning, Agent Daniels.
Good morning.
Just to quickly recap and reorient the court and jury. On Friday, we had spoken about the June 9th and 10th search of Chad Daybell's property, correct?
Correct.
I believe the last place we talked about was searching the barn and tools. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
We can go ahead and publish that.
Oh,
that's right,
because it's not being published up on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just confirm that the jurors can see the picture of Daybell property? Thank you. All right.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Wood. When we get to the point where you think we ought to not publish on the overhead, let us know.
Okay. Agent Daniels, can you, I'm gonna orient the jury as to what they're looking at right now. So, Your Honor, I am showing Agent Daniels what's been marked as Exhibit 170B. And where was that on the property?
So right now we're in the kind of the northeast portion of the property. And from this photograph, we're looking back towards the residence. And in the photograph, you can see the second story bedroom window. And I'm pointing at it with the laser up there. And in the very beginning, last Friday, we showed you a vantage point photograph. And one of those vantage point photographs was from that second story window that's in that picture. So right above that back door. And so there's a rear man door that comes out of the residence also. So that's the Chad Daybell residence. That's the upper story second bedroom window. And then we're going to be walking towards this large tree, and near the base of that tree is going to be J.J. Vallow's burial site. And so this is an overall photo as is. So as it looked when we were there, and we're just walking towards the burial. So what becomes the burial site. And this just gives you a good idea of how the taller vegetation or the taller grass as we're going that way. And that'll become important as we get closer.
And Your Honor, this has been marked States Exhibit 170C.
Okay.
And Agent, what are you looking at in 170C?
So now we're getting closer to that large tree, and our burial site's going to be in this area. And you can just start to see how we have higher vegetation or grasses around the burial site. And then there's a thinning of that vegetation in this area. And the picture doesn't really describe it, but when you're there ends up being a raised berm in this area. But we just want to show you kind of again, this is an as is, this is what it actually looked like. And so that's the little discrepancy we started to see in this area or this field.
And Your Honor, this is what's been marked as States Exhibit 170D.
All right.
And Agent, what did you notice in 170D?
So now we're just getting closer up photographs, and these are still as is, so hasn't been touched. But this is just showing that raised berm, and you can still see the higher vegetation around the raised berm. And then now that we're getting closer up it's a closer up photo, you can now see that just how that vegetation looks on the raised berm. It's not as thick as the vegetation around it.
States Exhibit 170E. What was of note to you in this picture?
We just this is just a closer up photo of the actual burial site where JJ is going to be located. And it's just a closer just to see that vegetation as it is on the raised berm. And you can just see how there's empty spots versus what it looked like around the area. So there's something of interest here to us.
Your Honor, this is 170A. Agent, what was the significance of this photograph?
This is another overall photograph as is. Now we're just on the opposite side of the pond. So we're over here now. The photographer's over here looking back this way. And so you can still see that large tree. So JJ's burial is going to be in this area. And in this photograph, you can kind of see one of our Faro scanner operators here taking some of the initial Faro scans of the area. We have a total station operator over here doing some total station measurements. And then just to give a relation, there's the fire pit areas over here. And then Tylee Ryan's burial is going to be in this general area. And so JJ's burial is going to be in this vicinity. And that's all that picture's showing.
Your Honor, States Exhibit 170F.
All right.
And Agent, what is the jury seeing here?
And we talked about it last Friday with Tylee's burial site. But once we've kind of found an area we think there could be a burial, now our process is we're just going to go layer by layer down. And so now that we've located an area of interest because of that raised berm, we've designated a little perimeter here. And now our job is just to go layer by layer and excavate this site. And if there's anything of interest, anything of value, we'll stop and take photographs, scans, and then kind of continue down to see what there is, if anything, at this location. And this picture is just showing how we've now taken off some of that first layer of vegetation, and we've started the process.
This is 170G. Agent, what was going on in 170G?
So we've removed the vegetation off the top, and what we start to notice are these different stones or cement blocks that start to protrude through the soil. So that starts to draw our attention. And so we stopped and took some photographs of what that's starting to look like.
(170H).
And so now we've gone another layer down. And so these are what the stones and cement block are looking like. And then I like this photograph because it shows whoever's done this in the ground.
Yes. You can continue, Mr. Wood.
Thank you. Agent, what did you observe about these stones?
So in this photograph, we see the stones now that are laid. And I like this photo just because it's showing how precise these stones are laid across this burial. And then on the left side of your photo, you start to see a wooden plank that's underneath the stones. And we'll get to the wooden planks in another photograph. But on this photograph, you can at least see how they're laid on top of these wooden planks. And then around these rocks, you can start to see the tree roots. This burial was next to this large tree. And you can see how somebody's taken the time to cut through these tree roots to place this burial here in this location.
And so, Agent, for clarity, did anyone on the ERT team cut those roots?
No, we did not. This is how when they were excavating this site, this is how this was found.
And Your Honor, State's Exhibit 170I. Detective, what did you observe here?
So after the stones were removed, these are two wooden planks that were underneath those stones.
And Your Honor, I think at this point, it'd probably be an appropriate time to stop publishing to the public.
Okay. We are going to continue with the photos published to the jurors and the parties, but for purposes of the live stream or the public in the courtroom, these remaining photos, because of their nature, will not be published.
And this is 170K. And Agent, what did you observe in 170K?
On the right side of the photo you're looking at, you can start to see a black plastic that's showing up. And so that was an indication that, okay, we're starting to find something in this burial site.
And did you notice was there a change in the soil?
I mean, the soil's it's getting darker as we get closer, but that's really all I can see in this photo.
And this is 170L.
And so once we started to see that black plastic that you saw in the last photo, at this point is when I got into the burial and I just took my hands and I just scraped around the plastic that we were seeing. And this is what this photo just shows after I removed the dirt from around that plastic that was showing. And this is where it just felt like this was a human head or skull that was inside that black plastic. And you could tell that black plastic was just tied up against whatever was inside. And at this point, we figured we had human remains, but we needed to determine that. So I got a razor blade and ended up making a cut in this black plastic. And I think in our next photo, we'll see once that's opened.
Your Honor, this is 170M as in Mike. And Agent, what did you observe here? Or what were you doing here?
So once we made the cut with the razor blade to that black outer plastic, we found that there was a white plastic wrapped around whatever was inside, the shape that we thought was the skull. And that's what we saw right there. So that white plastic was wrapped around whatever we had. And we had to do the same thing. We had to take the razor blade and then cut the white plastic. And I think we'll see a better picture next of what we found inside this white plastic.
Your Honor, this is State's Exhibit 170N as in November.
Okay.
And Agent, what did you observe here?
So once I made the cut on the white plastic, and again, it was tight against the head that was inside. So we pulled it up. I pulled it up, made the cut, trying to not disturb as much forensic evidence as possible. But as I made that cut, the human hair that you can see on the top of that photo started coming out as I made that cut. And that's the point where we knew these are the human remains. And these remains become J.J. Vallow's remains. And that's the point where this ends up becoming J.J. Vallow's burial site. And so that was the point where that becomes J.J.'s burial site. And we continue excavating after this.
Your Honor, this is 170O. And what do you observe here?
So now we've just continued. Now that we know these are human remains, the team's just continued to excavate. So now you're starting to see that black plastic throughout the burial site. And if you look left on that photo, you can see that we've now uncovered the feet area of the human remains. So we have a pretty good idea that that black plastic is wrapping the entire human remains. And then kind of sporadically throughout that burial, you can see the little glimpses of black plastic. So it's looking like the entire remains are wrapped in that. So that's what this picture's showing a good idea of.
An agent where you don't have the benefit of the laser pointer, is the mouse or the pointer moving over where you're talking about the feet?
Correct.
Your Honor, this is 170P. And what did you observe here, Agent?
This is just continuing that excavation. And now kind of in the middle of the photo up towards the head, you can start to see there's a bigger piece of duct tape that starts to appear. And if I had the laser pointer, I could point to it a little bit, but that was just a significant thing that we noticed on that wrapping, is that there's duct tape involved. And then earlier on that, when we showed you a closer up of the head, there was a big piece of duct tape involved. So those were just some significant things that when we see that type of stuff, we like to take photos of that, where they're located. So that's just one of the reasons we would have stopped and taken a photo of those locations when we saw that duct tape here.
Your Honor, this is 170Q. What did you observe here?
This is just a closer up picture. So now you can better see that piece of duct tape, and then just kind of see how that excavation's continuing.
And 170R.
And this is closer to a full excavation of the remains. So now, and you can see more pieces of duct tape have appeared. So now you get a better sense of how JJ's remains were placed in this burial, how they were wrapped, and now it's ready to be removed by the team and provided to the coroner.
And just for clarity's sake, this was on June 9th, correct?
Correct.
Of 2019?
JJ's remains were the first remains we found, and they were the first remains that were fully excavated and provided to the coroner on June 9th.
This is 170S.
So,
And what do you observe here?
so once JJ's remains were fully excavated, removed, in the bottom of the burial, in the center of this photo, you can see that there's some decomposition that was in that burial. And one of the things we did is we took some soil samples of that area.
$170T.
This is just a closer up photograph of that decomposition that was left in the burial.
Your Honor, this is 170J. What did you observe here?
This is just showing the burial excavated, so the human remains are removed, and then on that tarp are the stones that were placed over JJ, and then the wooden planks that were over JJ.
And 170U. What does the jury see in this picture?
So this picture just shows that the backhoe, what we did was after we had excavated the burial site, we brought in the backhoe to, at this time we didn't know where Tylee's remains were located. And since JJ's remains were in this location, We just thought we should go deeper in this excavation and go a little bit wider in this area, just in case whoever did this buried Tylee in the same area. It was just logical to us that they might have put her in the same place. So we used the excavator to dig a little deeper and go a little bit wider, just to see if we could find something else that might indicate Tylee. Her remains were around this area. And we didn't find anything else in this area. And then the backhoe backfilled this excavation site.
And Agent, we spoke the other day about Faro scans. What does the jury see here?
So in the bottom of the screen, you're just going to see a diagram or graphs of what the Faro scanner scanned in of JJ's burial site. And then on the right side, you're going to see ERT photographs. And once we click on those photographs, the top one will start with layer A. And then in the bottom scan of the burial, that layer A will show, the line will show up in the bottom of your diagram. That just gives you an approximate depth of where we were at layer A. So, and one thing to note about between layer A and B, there's not much difference because those rocks were right on top of the wooden planks.
What do you see in layer C?
And layer C was kind of at that point where we determined this was actually J.J. Vallow's human remains, where we cut open the head portion of the bag, and that's right at about 1 foot.
And layer D?
Layer D is where we've excavated a lot of the top of the human remains. And you can see that black plastic bag over the majority of the top of the human remains, and that's just under 1 foot.
Layer E.
Layer E was that final excavation point where we were ready to remove those human remains from the burial, and we're just over 2 feet.
Your Honor, at this time, I have no more questions for the witness.
All right, thank you. All right, once you're ready, Mr. Pryor, you can conduct cross-examination.
And Judge, before I start, by stipulation of the parties, asking the court to admit exhibits 35 and 36, defense exhibits 35 and 36. Those would represent photographs taken from the garage.
All right, has the state been able to review proposed exhibits 35 and 36?
Yes, we have no objection.
Defense exhibits 35 and 36 are admitted.
Good morning, officer.
Good morning.
I did that without having to turn the mic on. That's a first, I think, today. I'd like to go over procedurally your involvement in this case, if we could take the time to go over all of the aspects of this case that you've been involved in. Would that be fair?
Okay.
Okay. I'd like to go back to the search involving Alex Cox's apartment. Were you involved in any aspect of that?
I was involved in the search of 2 apartments. I just have to remember which is which.
That's okay. You were involved in and they were two different parts of the building complex. Would that be fair?
Correct.
And one of them may have been apartment 107, which would have been Alex Cox's.
I can't remember who owned which apartment, but there were 2 apartments that were fairly close together.
And could you explain to me what your involvement was in the search of Alex Cox's apartment?
I was an ERT senior team leader in the search of both the apartments, and I just don't remember who owned which apartment.
Okay, and part of your the aspect of being involved in that is that uh, you were involved in a cadaver dog search of that complex. Do you recall that?
I do.
Okay. And was that your cadaver dog or was it another agency's cadaver dog?
It was an outside agency's.
Okay. Were you the supervisor in charge of that search?
I'd have to review my logs for those searches.
Okay.
I remember speaking to those, the cadaver dogs, people that ran that operation.
Okay.
So I may have been.
Okay. And there was some reference in some of the police reports of the use of luminol. Can you tell me what that is?
Luminol is a tool that we'll use to attempt to find blood on a scene.
Okay. And as part of the cadaver dog and the use of the luminol, you applied that to an upstairs closet in one of the apartments. Is that right?
I can't remember. I'd have to review my logs, my notes for that from that day for that apartment.
Do you have those logs and notes with you?
I don't.
Okay. Okay. And then do you have a recollection of whether or not the cadaver dog indicated any positive on any of the locations of either of the apartments?
I don't. Again, I'd have to review my notes.
Okay. And were you involved in the search of any of those garages of either of the units?
Yes. If the garages were right attached to the apartments, I was.
Okay. But again, you don't have any recollection, would that be fair, of what was discovered in either of those garages? Is that right?
I'd have to review my logs and records, my notes.
Okay. And it's interesting that throughout your testimony in the last day or two, you didn't make reference of having to review your notes or logs about this case. Do you find it unusual that you have to review your notes and logs as part of a cadaver dog search of two apartments that were relevant to this case?
No, I knew I was going to be speaking about this search, so I reviewed my notes and logs and records for this Daybell property we were speaking of. I didn't know I'd be talking about the search warrants of the apartments, so I didn't review those prior to coming. And I've conducted many searches in the last 4 or so years.
Okay. Yeah. Now you talked a little bit about the second floor and the view from the second floor of the Daybell residence. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Have you been in that house?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware that the so-called second floor is an attachment to the garage?
Yes.
Are you aware that when you leave the main residence, you have to go in the garage and then further go through another entranceway to go up a set of stairs to get into that attached structure to the garage?
Objection. Counsel is testifying. Move to strike from record.
Sustain.
Are you aware that the structure is an attachment to the garage? You've already testified that's correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you're aware that to gain entry to that attached structure to the garage, you have to leave the main residence. Are you aware of that?
Same objection.
World.
Yes.
Okay. And you don't have any knowledge personally of what that attached structure to the garage is used for, do you?
In that second story bedroom, there was a mattress on the floor. And on June 9th, there was a comforter and it was opened and there were pillows there as if somebody had been sleeping in it. That's why I call it a bedroom.
Are you aware of who was residing in the residence at the time of September of 2019?
I am not.
Okay. Are you aware who was residing in that residence as of June of 2020?
I am not.
As far as the pictures are concerned of the garage, do you know who took those pictures?
I do.
Who took them?
ERT member Rachel Wright.
And that's a member of your staff, is that right?
She's an ERT member, correct?
Okay. Now, in the beginning, you had mentioned that uh, you were staging up at the Salem Church with your ERT team prior to going to the Daybell residence. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay, and how many of you were there at the Salem Church staging on that morning? Do you recall?
I would guess that the 8 of us were,
Okay.
plus other law enforcement members.
Well, that's what I want to get at. How many other law enforcement members were also there?
I wouldn't know specific amount.
Okay. And then you had testified that you were waiting as your ERT team was up at the Salem Church for local law enforcement to secure the facility of the Daybell property. Is that right?
Correct.
How many people was it going to take to secure the property? Do you recall?
I don't.
Okay. Well, you had a meeting prior to going out to the Daybell property with all of the folks, law enforcement agencies involved in this case. Did you not?
We did.
Okay. So how many law enforcement agencies were you dealing with when you had that pre-meeting before going to the property?
I don't remember how many were there.
Okay. You don't remember how many agencies, or you don't remember how many people?
Both.
So you don't know whether the Rexburg police was there, correct?
I'm sure the Rexburg Police Department was there
At the meeting.
at the meeting. Yes.
Fremont County?
Fremont County would have been there. Yes.
Anybody with the Attorney General's office?
That I wouldn't know.
Anybody from the prosecutor's office at that meeting?
I believe the prosecutor's office would have had a representative there. Yeah.
Do you know which one of these folks was at that meeting, when the staging meeting?
Probably Rob Wood would have been there.
Okay. Madison County Police Department there at the staging meeting?
And I'm talking about the briefing meeting, probably the night before the staging meeting. Not at this church, not at the church parking lot area. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's what I'm talking about
Okay.
too, officer. I'm talking about the meeting prior to, and I've said staging, and I apologize for that. I see where you're trying to correct me. Thank you. I'm talking about the pre-planning meeting before you approached the Daybell property.
Okay.
Was Madison County there as well?
I can't remember that, but they probably were.
Okay. So in essence, your team of 8 plus at the pre-planning meeting, representatives from Fremont County, Madison County, Rexburg Police, anybody else?
Other FBI employees.
Okay. So in essence, do you have a recollection? And I don't want to hold you to this specifically, but do you have a recollection of exactly how many law enforcement personnel were at this pre-planning meeting before approaching the Daybell property?
I don't.
Okay. Was it more than 10?
Yes.
Okay. More than 20?
I can't speculate
Okay.
on that.
You were present there, right?
Yes.
Were you running the meeting?
No,
Who was running the meeting?
I don't remember.
Okay. Who's the one who initiated setting up the meeting with all of these folks before you went out to the Daybell property?
I don't know.
So you just folks all decided to get together the day before? Or was there someone sending out a memo or some sort of note saying, hey, let's get together before we arrive at the Daybell property? Or was it just spontaneous planning of a meeting?
I would guess that one of the case agents put it together, but I can't recall a head who put it all together.
Okay. But you're the person in charge of the search and the process of the search on the Daybell property in June 9th of 2020. Were you not?
I oversaw the evidence response team, and I oversaw the processing of evidence on the scene at the Daybell residence on June 9th and 10th.
So would it be fair to say when you arrived on June 9th on the morning, and my recollection is you arrived there about 7:30, is that right?
Yeah, just after, I think, but yes.
Okay. When you arrived there, do you have a recollection of how many law enforcement personnel were on site at the Daybell property from all of the agencies?
I think our logs show that just over 50 people were there on both days. And that would have been the totality of the entire day. So I don't know how many would have been there at 7:30 in the morning.
And I've taken the liberty of reviewing your logs and saying that there were 50 people there. That's what you recollect. Is that right?
Just over 50 would be my guess.
And you're aware that Mr. Wood was one of those 50 who were there on site at the search of the burial of JJ and Tylee. Is that right?
I know I saw him on scene. At the time, I didn't necessarily know who Mr. Wood was.
Okay. So when you met him the day before at the meeting, you didn't introduce yourself. Is that right?
I don't think so.
Okay. So prior to going out on any kind of an investigation of this case, you're telling me that the prosecutor was at the meeting before, the prosecutor was on the site, and you're in charge of the search. You never took the time to introduce yourself to the lead prosecutor in this case. Is that correct?
I don't remember doing so, and
Okay.
I was busy.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that there were a number of law enforcement personnel on that property in this rural piece of acreage? Would that be fair?
Yes,
And would it be fair to say that that would have caused at least some sort of an opportunity for people to look and see what's going on the property? Draw attention to the property, didn't it? Having all those people out there?
like what kind of people?
Well, you had to have security who prevented people from driving by. You blocked down the roads a little bit, did you not?
Oh, I believe the locals did block down the roads. Yes,
And you had to stop people from driving by and gawking at what was going on, right?
I didn't do that,
But you would agree in a situation where there's 50 law enforcement people ascending down onto a piece of property that would have a tendency to draw some attention to what was going on, right?
maybe.
Okay. Do you think it's just another day out in the rural property that there's 50 people out on your property?
Objection argumentative.
Sustained.
Okay. Did you happen to notice anybody looking around to see what was going on the property that morning?
No, sir, I was busy.
Okay. But as part of your pre-planning meeting, you set up the time to make sure that the property was secured to avoid that very thing. Did you not?
I did not.
Okay. Was that a part of the discussion of the meeting before you went on the property that you need to secure the property and avoid people from gawking and looking at what was going on?
I did not discuss that.
Okay. How long of a meeting was this?
I don't recall.
Now, when you arrived on the scene, you talked about the garage where these tools were located. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Okay. Did you happen to look at that garage?
yes.
Okay. The door of the garage was open when you folks arrived. Do you recall that?
I don't recall if it was opened or closed.
Okay. Were you present when the pictures were taken of the tools in the garage?
I don't recall being present.
Okay. Now you showed some pictures of the property where the remains of JJ were located. Is that correct?
Correct.
And it appeared to me that it was some distance from the back of the house. Would that be fair?
That would be fair.
And how much of a distance, based on your estimation, would you say it is from the back of the house to the site where JJ was excavated?
I don't know the distance.
Okay. And would you agree with me that the amount of lawn on the property at that time around the burial site of JJ Vallow, the grass was quite high?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
The length of the grass around the site where JJ was excavated, would you agree that the grass was high?
In that general area, the grass was fairly high.
And would it be fair to describe that as sort of a pasture part of the property?
I wouldn't say yes or no to that.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that the area in front of JJ's burial site, there was a significantly large tree?
Near his burial site, for that property, there was a large tree.
Right. And when you say near his site, within a few feet, wouldn't you agree with that?
I wouldn't agree with that. I had somewhere that we have a measurement for that. So I would wait till I reviewed that to see what that measurement was.
Okay, and in looking at the pictures in front of JJ's burial site, there's a large irrigation pond of some kind. Would you agree with that?
Yes, there's a pond nearby.
Okay. And it didn't look like the lawn or the grass back there had been mowed in some time, right?
I don't know what kind of lawn or grass or pasture that was, or if you mow it. So I wouldn't,
Well, it was quite high, right? The grass.
I just don't know if you mow that grass. I don't know what you do to it. So
Did it look like it had been mowed?
it did not recently. No.
Okay. Now I want to go back a little bit, and I'm going to change gears a little bit, and I'm doing this for a reason. Your, at least the theory from the prosecutor is that the bodies were placed in the ground for JJ and Tylee in the month of September of 2019. Is that correct?
I don't know what the theory is.
Okay. And you found the jewelry, the piece of jewelry that you made note of around JJ's or around Tylee's neck. You showed a picture of a pendant around Tylee's neck. You recall that?
Are you talking about the silver charm?
Yeah, the pendant, the charm.
Okay. Yes, we collected a charm.
Okay. And let's assume for argument that the bodies were placed in September of 2019. When did you retrieve that pendant? And when did the picture get taken?
I don't know anything about the picture. We collected the charm on June 9th.
So again, for purposes of argument, September to June 9th. 10 months, 9 months later? Is that what?
I can just tell you when we collected the charm.
Okay. Do you know whether the charm was on the top of the ground?
Yeah, the silver charm was observable by eye. It was on top of the ground.
It wasn't like anybody was trying to conceal it.
All I can tell you is the charm was located on top of the ground.
Okay, well, let's put it this way. The charm was in plain view. Would that be fair?
We located the charm on top of the ground.
Okay. Now, in addition to removing the remains of Tylee from the ground, at that time, you also had access to a backhoe. Is that correct?
Correct.
And to make sure that you retrieved all of the potential skeletal remains or otherwise, you engaged in lifting the backhoe and removing dirt. Is that correct? Of Tylee's burial site.
We utilized the backhoe to help excavate around the area of her burial site before we knew where she was located. Yes.
Okay. And then after her remains were removed, did you engage in any more search to determine whether or not you got all of the remains out of the ground?
Yes.
And you're comfortable or relatively certain that you removed all of the remains possible from the gravesite of Tylee Ryan. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you're relatively certain that as part of your search and the use of the backhoe, you've got all of the remains of J.J. Vallow out of that site as well?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at the conclusion of your search on the first day, and approximately what time was that?
I would say it was sometime after 5 p.m. on the first day, June 9th.
Okay. What plans did you put in place to secure the property overnight?
It was the local Rexburg Police Department and Fremont County Sheriff's Office who secured the scene overnight.
Okay. And you don't know the number of officers or who was there to secure the scene, is that right?
I don't. It was their plan.
Okay. Now, as part of the investigation, and Judge, could I have exhibit 35 and 36, please?
Yeah, we'll have.
If I could just have a moment, Judge. Judge, if I could just have a moment, please. And Judge, could I retrieve a piece of paper from my desk? May I have permission to go to my desk and get a piece of paper?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Judge, if I could publish.
You may.
No, officer, I'm showing you a close-up of the tools. Do you recognize that at all?
I do.
Okay, and those are the tools that were in Mr. Daybell's. We would describe that as a garage. Would that be fair?
That would be fair.
Okay, and you're looking at the tools, and these are part of the tools that you felt that you would determine whether they had some applicability to the digging of any graves or in any way involved in the processing of the burial sites. Would that be fair?
That would be fair.
Did you confiscate all of these tools?
No, we did not.
Did you have an opportunity to look at all of the tools?
Yes.
Okay, and you examined them personally, is that right?
I walked by all of these tools, yes.
And you looked for them for potential issues that might be involved in whether they showed any signs of being involved in the site, right?
I just walked by all of these tools.
And would this picture be a fair representation of what the tools look like on that particular day?
This zoomed in picture, or
Well, I'll zoom it back out if you'd like me to.
I would call this an as-is photograph
Okay.
of what the tools looked like as you walked into that main garage door.
So this would be what the tools looked like as you walked in, and then you directed, I think you said the name was Rachel Wright, to take pictures of that. Is that correct?
This would be what this is one of her overall photographs that she would have taken.
Okay. And there was nothing that you identified in these tools that would indicate any issues of concern. Would that be fair?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay. I'd like to zoom in on the large black handle tool. Is there anything that you can see on that tool that would cause you of any concern regarding part of the digging site of the Daybell property?
I'd have to look at the entire tool.
Okay. Well, I wanted you to just look at the black handle. Is there anything on the black handle that indicates to you that there's any issues with that tool?
Again, it's kind of the totality of the tool.
Okay,
and the situation, where it's at, where it's located,
okay.
proximity of the fire pit. So there's more than just looking at a little speck on that handle.
Okay, and you would agree there's like a little speck on the handle, right?
I wouldn't agree with that until I was able to see it in person, not just
Okay.
from this photograph.
Okay. And Judge, I'm going to disconnect for a moment and then reconnect if that's acceptable to the court.
Go ahead.
Judge, could I have some light on?
Yes, I'll request our clerk please accomplish that. Thank you.
Now, Officer, you previously testified that that's how you saw the tools when you first, from your recollection of when you first approached the garage. Is that right?
When I would have done a walkthrough, correct.
And then at some point, the tools were removed at some point during the day, correct?
Correct.
And they were laid out. Oops, I'm sorry, Judge. They were laid out on the ground for photographic purposes. Is that right?
The tools from that side, we laid some of them out
Okay.
just under the garage door. It was opened just to take an overall photo of some of the tools. Not all of those tools were taken as evidence. That would be right.
Okay. And then, Judge, again, I'd like to publish again.
You may.
And then at some point during the day, the tools were removed and you placed them on the ground. Is that right?
Like this photo shows, the tools on the west side of this garage were laid out and this photograph was taken.
Okay. And you don't know exactly when that took place, right?
I don't have a time for you now.
Okay. But sometime on June 9th or 10th, right?
Correct.
Okay. And were you the one who laid those tools out on the ground?
I did not.
Okay. So someone from your staff did that.
Someone on scene did that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. But you would agree with me that the tools in the prior picture were first, and this is a subsequent picture paid by some or taken by someone who took it somewhat after the tools were removed and put on the ground. Is that right?
That the first picture we reviewed was taken prior to this picture, I would
Okay.
agree
All right.
with.
But then I'm moving in on this picture. And do you see on the handle, the black handle?
Yes, I see. Oh, are you talking about the handle of, I was looking at the rake, but you're talking about maybe
No,
the handle of
let's
the,
look at the black handle of the picture that I showed earlier. Now we're going to look at the black handle after it's on the ground.
okay, I see the black
That
hand.
one?
Zoom out.
I think that's as far as I'm going to go. Zoom out. Okay.
Okay, so you're talking about the black handle of the shovel.
The shovel.
Okay. I see that.
Let's try this a little differently. Now that's the same black shovel. What do you see on the handle of that black shovel?
It's hard to tell what that is.
Okay. It's something, right?
I can't tell what that is.
Well, I didn't ask you what it is. It's a different look than what was looking up when it was in the garage, right?
I can't say that for sure,
Okay.
but
All right. And Judge, again, I'd like to disengage. And judge again. If we could on the HDMI, Judge.
Okay, you want to publish something?
Yes, publish something.
What are
else,
you
Judge. I'm
publishing?
sorry.
Mr. Pryor, what is being published?
Judge, and again, officer, I'll represent you. This is a close-up of the handle from the very first picture. Do you recognize?
So this is the same shovel handle?
Yes,
Okay.
from the first picture. And Judge, when you're ready.
Yeah, it can be published.
And again, officer, I'm looking for the difference from this first shovel to the one on the ground. Do you see any discernible difference, officer?
I don't think I'm seeing what you're trying to get me to see.
Okay, well, I'm not trying to get you to see anything. I just want you to tell me whether or not you see this shovel handle that's up against the garage wall.
I can see a black shovel handle.
Okay, fair enough. Judge, could we publish what's marked as Exhibit 36?
All right, Exhibit 36 may be published.
And obviously, at some point, officer, the shovels were placed back against the wall. Would you agree with that in a subsequent picture?
Correct.
Okay. Do you see anything unusual about the handle of the shovel from the picture on the floor?
From this picture, I don't see anything unusual.
Okay. Does that help?
I'm still not seeing anything.
Okay. So what I gathered, officer, is that at some point, pictures were taken of the shovels against the wall. That was the first picture I showed you, correct?
The very first picture, I think, was the as-is photo of the shovels against the wall.
And then subsequently, the pictures were shown to be on the floor of the garage, correct?
Correct.
And someone took the shovels from the wall and put them on the floor, correct?
Correct.
And then at some point later than that, the shovels were taken from the floor and put on the garage wall, and that would be the last picture I took, correct?
Somebody moved them and put them against the wall and took a photo.
Right.
I don't know at what time
Okay.
that happened.
But you do know that the pictures were, in terms of a time frame, the pictures were, the first picture was the as-is photo, correct?
I know that. I know the first picture was the as-is photo because they were in place.
Okay, and then the other two photos, we don't know exactly when those were taken.
I'd have to look at our photo logs
Okay,
to kind of match that up for you to tell you which one was taken before the other. That makes
Okay.
sense.
at any time, officer, did anybody during the digging of either of the grave sites use the Daybell's shovels to dig the grave sites?
No, they did not.
Did anybody use the pickaxe there on the Daybell grave site during your excavation?
No, they did not.
But nobody had access to the garage from the time you arrived at 7:30 on June 9th. Is that right? Until sorry, that wasn't particularly clear, was it?
No.
Thank you. Nobody other than law enforcement was able to go on the property on June 9th through June 10th during this excavation, other than law enforcement. Is that correct?
As far as I'm aware, yes.
So there wouldn't have been any citizens or anybody else who would have had access to the Daybell property from June 9th until June 10th, correct?
Correct.
So the shovels, as they see, were basically secured by your law enforcement or all of the law enforcement agencies that were there on those particular days. Would that be fair?
Fair.
Okay. Now, the burial site of JJ, we talked about that. That was approximately a foot and a half deep. Is that right?
I think it was just over 2 feet deep.
Okay. And then the length and the width, do you recall that?
I don't. I'd have to look at our information from our Barrow scanner.
And you were basing the ability to locate JJ's remains basically by some electronic data that you received indicating someone was there on the 23rd. Is that right?
One of the things we used was telephone ping information showing that somebody was in that area. But one of the reasons we showed you those photos we took was just to show you that it was fairly easy to walk to. As we walked towards that burial, that raised berm, it was pretty easy to distinguish where that burial site was.
And I appreciate that.
It was hidden though.
Judge, I'm going to
Mr. Pryor,
object.
I'm going to object to you talking over the top of his response, Mr. Pryor. Let him finish his answer before.
And Judge, it's non-responsive.
Mr. Pryor, you just ran over me. Stop cutting people off in your cross, please, including me. Let the witness finish, and we'll never get an accurate record if you keep doing that. So please do that.
And Judge, my objection is non-responsive. I asked him about the electronic data. I didn't ask him about the rest of this colloquy.
Your Honor,
Ask another question, Mr. Pryor.
You engaged in the use of electronic data to locate the remains of JJ Vallow on the 23rd. Is that right?
That was just one of the things we used, the telephone ping information showing that there was a telephone ping in that northeast area by the pond. Was just one reason or indicator to show us to go look in that area.
Okay, thank you. And that northeast corner is adjacent to one of the main roads that runs by the front of the Daybell property. Is that right?
No, that's not right. The northeast part of the property sits back from the main road.
Okay, and it would be in terms of a square, if you're looking at the Daybell property, it would be on the upper left portion of the Daybell property. Would that be fair?
No, it'd be on the upper right side.
If you're looking at the Daybell property.
Oh, you're talking about from the road, or
yes, that's right.
I don't know from which. It's on the northeast quadrant of the property.
And then the location of Tylee's remains, would it be fair to say, are in the center of the property, of the Daybell property?
Probably close. It's just east of that large red garage.
Okay. Now on the, you had made mention of a pet cemetery. I think that's the word you used. Is that right?
Correct.
And as part of the search, did you locate some pillars or what appeared to be a makeshift sign of some kind on the Daybell property?
Near the area that I called the pet cemetery, there were two wooden posts.
Right.
And in front of one of the wooden posts, there was a dog statue.
Okay. Okay. And was that part of the way you were able to identify where this pet cemetery was, by that dog statue?
When I initially designated an area of the pet cemetery, there was the dog statue that was an indicator.
Okay.
And then in front of the pet cemetery or the dog statue, there were several depressions, which could be an indicator of burials. So I kind of made a square area or perimeter around those burials and called that the initial pet cemetery.
And was there also a tree somewhere in a close location of those two pillars and poles?
I don't remember that.
Okay. Rich, I think that's all I have at this point.
All right. Let's go ahead and do redirect if you have any, Mr. Wood.
Just briefly. Agent, you were talked to about by counsel about securing the scene between the 9th of June 10th and the night of June 9th and the morning of June 10th, correct?
Correct.
When you returned on June 10th, was the property in the same condition as you had left it on June 9th?
It was.
You were asked about some tools that you collected.
Yes.
When you collected those tools, what did you do with them?
We packaged it at the end of the day. We packaged them and provided them to the Rexburg Police Department.
You're asked about JJ's burial site and electronic data that helped you find it. You were in the process of speaking about, let me rephrase that. What else led you to locate JJ besides the electronic data?
So besides that electronic data that just gave us kind of a general vicinity to look at, once we started progressing to that area, we showed you already the photographs that showed you how high the vegetation was in the general area, that whole pasture, whatever you want to call it. And as we progressed towards his burial, we kind of showed you how that vegetation right above the berm was different than everything around it. And that raised berm was different than everything around it. So once you're out there and you kind of see that difference, whether it's a depression or a berm, and it's just different than all of the surrounding area, that's what kind of drew our attention. So the ping might have got us to the general vicinity, that northeast quadrant, but once you were there and you kind of use these our other trainings, techniques, it just honed us in on this is different. And then we could start excavating that site that we showed you earlier.
You were asked about a planning meeting.
Yes.
Do you recall when that took place?
I don't remember exactly, but I'm going to guess it was probably the night before the actual search warrant. So probably June 8th, the evening of June 8th is my guess.
And Mr. Pryor asked you if I was there.
Correct.
Do you recall the 2 Fremont County prosecutors who were there?
I don't.
Okay.
At the time, I didn't really know many people in the area, so.
I believe earlier, well, you were asked about the pet cemetery.
Yes,
Did you locate any pets in the pet cemetery?
we did.
What did you locate?
We found a dog remains and cat remains.
Your Honor, that's all I have.
All right. That will conclude the testimony then of Agent Daniels. I'm going to inquire from the state and the defense. Is there going to be any recall of this witness coming up?
Your Honor, we're not planning on it. However, we are advising all of our law enforcement that they will essentially remain under subpoena up through rebuttal.
Okay. And with that then, Agent Daniels, you are still subject to the exclusionary order, meaning please don't watch the trial because it is being live streamed and easily accessible, or observe any trial testimony so that you may have the ability to be recalled to testify if necessary.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. That'll conclude your testimony. You can go ahead and step down.